Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, everyone. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Councillor Asghar Khan, and I will be chairing today's meeting, Strategy Resources. And I would like to welcome you all. As you know, this meeting is a webcast on Leeds Council's YouTube channel. And I also would like to welcome those of who are joining us through the YouTube channel. As you know, today we've got a busy agenda ahead of us, and there are three major items. One is the latest financial position of the Leeds City Council, looking for outturn for the last years, and the quarter position for 2024-25 update. And as you know, this paper will be going to the exec board on Wednesday. And I want to say thank you, Councillor Cooper, for letting have the insight this paper to the board, and we can, scrutinise this, and then it'll go to the board as well. And the other two items are integrated digital service, and also an update on the being our best organisation plan. And now I'll go into the formal council business. I will ask everybody to formally introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Tom Hinchcliffe, Bramley and Stanley.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson, Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Good morning, Craig Timmins, Carvely and Farsley.
Good morning, Andy Parnham, Councillor for Armley.
Morning, Andrew Byram, Interim Chief Digital Information Officer.
Good morning, David Halligan, Chief Technology Officer.
Good morning, Alex McKeon-Hannant, Head of Corporate Support.
Good morning, Richard Ellis, Deputy Chief Officer, Financial Services.
Morning, Mariana Paxton, Director of Strategy and Resources.
Morning, Councillor Deborah Cooper, Exec Board Member for Resources.
Good morning all, Councillor Ed Carlisle for Hunslet and Riverside.
Good morning, Councillor Winkinger, representing Morley South.
Good morning, Councillor Diane Chapman, representing Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, Billy Flynn, Councillor for Adlam Wharfdale Ward.
Morning, everyone. Rob Clayton, I'm the Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Thank you for the introduction. And moving on to agenda, then can I ask Rob to go through the first 5 items of the business, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, just brief with the procedural items that we cover at the start of each meeting. So item 1 is appeals, and there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Item 2 is exclusion of the public, rather. There are no items to be excluded from the public domain, Chair. Item 3 is late items. Now, there are no late items, but there, as you all know, there was some supplementary information that the Chair has already mentioned in relation to some items that are also being considered by Exec Board, and due to those publication deadlines, they were published as supplementary documents. So just to cover that point off, Chair. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will briefly pause to allow any members to declare and delete to Council's Code of Conduct. I shall take silence as none, Chair. And then lastly is apologies, and we have apologies from Councillor Andrew Carter this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Item number 6 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 17th of June 2024. Do members accept these minutes are true and correct record? Yep. And the minutes are on page 7, so I'm going to go for matter arising. So page by page, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and page 14. Finally, page 15. Are there any matters rising from the board members? Nope. Rob, do you want to pick up any matter rising from the minutes as well, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just one on this occasion. So it was minute 110, which is in relation to the work programming. There were two suggestions, one on core business transformation and one on civic enterprise leads that have now been incorporated into the work programme, which we'll consider later. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We now move to agenda item number 7, which is looking at our budget for both last year and the current financial year, which highlights the ongoing financial challenges. I'm going to ask Richard to present this item, and also want to thank Victoria and yourself and your team for doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. I recognise that everyone will have looked through the details of the report anyway, but what's prepared for you is just a short presentation just to pick out some of the sort of key points and sort of key issues in terms of the outturn position for 23-24 and for 24-25, the Q1 position. In terms of the financial outturn position, we are currently showing, or we are showing a balance, or reported a balanced position to June's executive board. This showed that there was a directorate overspend of £44.7 million. That was balanced by a number of different actions, which we'll go to in a minute. In terms of that directorate overspend, you would have received previous reports throughout the year in terms of the key issues that were driving that. But within children's and health, there was an overspend of £38.12 million, of which children's looked after was an overspend of £26 million. There's an overspend on transport of about £5 million. In terms of community housing and environment, the overspend there was due to additional costs within the waste services and unfunded elements in terms of housing subsidy that the council had to fund. And then in terms of strategy and resources of the £3.3 million overspend, and that was largely due to variations within CEL. Just want to move on, Rob, to the next slide. Reference the fact that despite the directorate overspend of £44.7 million, we actually reported a balanced position, and that was largely through to the contribution of £17.7 million received from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. It was a contribution from one of their reserves, their transport reserves. There was utilisation of £5.2 million of the Merrion House Reserve. There was circa about £17.8 million of debt savings, and there's also the utilisation of earmarked reserves as well. When the 23-24 budget was approved in February 23, it contained assumptions around the delivery of £58.6 million of budget action plans, and of that, £45.7 million were delivered in year. In recognition of the council's financial challenge on the budget in 23-24, there were an additional £7.2 million of budget action plans that were identified in year, and of that sum, circa about £4.9 million were delivered in year. So the totality of the savings that were delivered in 23-24 were £50.6 million. The housing revenue account underspent by £0.9 million. And that underspent has been a contribution to the HRA reserves and will help make sure that the housing revenue account continues to remain robust and resilient. In terms of the dedicated school grant, there was an overspend of £2.6 million. And as a result of that, that took the level of reserves in terms of DSG and schools down to £6.4 million. Capital receipts flexibilities. These are the capital receipts that the government allow the council to use to fund transformational projects. In 23-24, circa £19.4 million were utilised, and that delivered savings of £9.57 million, and that contributed towards the outturn position I've just gone through. Also contributing towards that position in future years as well, there's the council's voluntary leavers scheme, so 114.84 full-time equivalents left in 23-24, and that will generate £22.3 million of savings over a 5-year period before reconfiguration. In terms of the council's reserves position, that reduced from £44.5 million down, reduced by £44.5 million down from £219.1 million down to 176.4, but that £44.5 million included £5.7 million contribution to the insurance reserve, £9.2 million contribution to social care. There was the £8.2 million, which was a Section 31 grant, which was the equalising effect of council tax deficits from previous years during COVID. School reserves went down by £8.5 million as well. In terms of the council's general reserve, that increased by £3 million up to £36.2 million, and the medium-term financial strategy and the budget for 24-25 do assume a continuing contribution of £3 million per annum to that position. In terms of council tax collection rates, in 23-24, £442 million had to be collected in year, of which 93.94% was collected. That compares unfavourably with 22-23 and also previous years, the last normal years before the impact of COVID. And as a result of that, is rather the council now expects to collect 98.5% of that council tax requirement over the fullness of time. In terms of business rates collection, the collection rate, 363.7 million was to be collected, of which 97.03% was collected in year, and that does compare favourably with the amount to be collected over the fullness of time, which is about sort of 97.1%. Go the next slide, please, Rob. In terms of the capital programme, when council approved the 23-24 capital programme in February 23, it estimated or projected spend about £518.8 million. But as reported to February's exec board and full council, is the projected spend for 23-24 reduced to 397.4, and we outturned in March 31st, 24 at £391.2 million. And in terms of treasury management, the external debt as at the 31st of March 24 was £2.494 billion. But remember, within that, £748 million of that relates to the housing revenue account. I don't know, Chair, do you want me to pause after that financial year for any questions, or do you want me to launch into 24-25 in the Q1 report?
I think let's not pause, just go through the other full report, and then we can open it to board members as well.
Okay, thank you. So this also going to executive board this week is the Q1 financial position for the council. So at the end of the first quarter, the council is projecting an overspend of 19.936 million, and you can see the key variations within that. The first one is on adults and health. There's sort of £7.9 million, and that's almost entirely due to greater than budgeted for demand pressures. And if you look in Appendix 3 of the main report, there's some really useful graphs in there which indicate just what those pressures are within the service. And then within children's and families, that's projecting an overspend of circa about £17.9 million. and that's largely due to pressures within children's looked after. Can I have the next slide, please, Rob? So we talked about adults and health and children and families. Strategic is showing an unprojected underspend of £7.35 million, but that's largely due to the contribution from reserves, and that's the social care contingency reserves, which is now being applied in year. In terms of the 24-25 budget, when the budget was approved by council in February 24, it's £63.9 million of savings were approved, and of this, £60.37 million are being projected to delivered. However, recognising the financial position which you just outlined, a further £31.96 million of savings have been identified, of which £17.23 million are projected to be delivered. So in terms of the actions being taken by the council, given the financial challenge that we've got, so there's a lot of cross-directorate work taking place to support and challenge the high cost areas and spend areas that you've just identified and where some of the key budget pressures are. So specifically, there's wraparound support with regard to CEL and also within children's services as well. Directorates and directorates are required to identify further budget action plans in order to deliver a balanced budget position by year end. And there's a number of cross-council actions that are being undertaken as well, of which you can see that no travel is to be undertaken unless it's required for the essential delivery of the service. And also within a number of exceptions, sort of social work roles, for instance, there's a complete recruitment freeze now in place. There's tighter controls in place with regard to agency and overtime, and all spend that is deemed not critical for the delivery of the services not to be incurred. So to deliver this requirement, all orders need to be approved and no spend is to be incurred on purchase cards unless it's critical to the delivery of the service. A reference to 23-24 collection rates in terms of council tax and business rates. The collection rates for the end of the first 2 months is 18.25%. That's slightly behind the 18.65% in 23-24 and behind the 19.2% in May 19. I reference the fact in the past we've always budgeted to collect 99% of council tax in the fullness of time, but recognising some of these variations, we do assume, or the budget does assume, that only 98% of the council tax due in 24-25 will be collected. Business rates collections are 21.37% to date, and again that's slightly behind where we were last year at 21.76 and slightly behind the May 19 figure as well. The housing revenue account is projecting a balanced budget position, and in terms of there's a whole raft of prudential indicators for Treasury management which are required to publish, but key to that is that in terms of the council's operational boundary and authorised limits that were set by council in February, we're currently within those. Thank you, Chair. If there's any questions or any points of clarification, I'm happy to respond to them.
Thank you, Richard, for introducing the report and also going through the presentation. Before I open to the board members, can I ask Councillor Cooper, does she want to make any comment at this stage, or we can bring her later on?
I'm happy to let scrutiny members comment and I'll come in at the end. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I'll open for any comments or questions from the board members. Councillor Carlisle.
This might be, apologies, this might be a daft question, but like I appreciate comparison is a dangerous thing, but I'd be interested to know how we compare on, say, debt level or just on all the kind of indicators we've already talked about with other comparable core cities.
In terms of our debt levels and comparisons with other core cities, Leeds has got a relatively high level of debt in respect of that. And in terms of sort of reporting debt, it is one of the sort of Office of Local Government's key performance indicators. The trouble with the reporting debt, it can be a bit simplistic sometimes. So by way of example, in terms of the Leeds position outlined in the presentation, is that Leeds is the second largest housing authority in the country, and it's got housing revenue account debt in the figures that get reported by Oflog. And the reality is, and it's very difficult to do, is that the housing revenue account debt should be excluded from those calculations, because some local authorities that we compare against don't have any housing debt whatsoever. So it can be a little bit simplistic doing that. So there are comparators out there, but I think sometimes they need a bit of clarification as to, what we're actually reporting. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, if I could just add to what Richard said, and I know he slightly touched on it with the housing revenue account. So in terms of our debt ratio towards our assets, we are actually performing a good rate in terms of our debt. And also the fact that we are the second largest authority, not just in terms of the housing stock and in terms of asset that we have, but in everything. So we're the second largest authority. So if we're performing at the second, then we're where we're supposed to be. It might, we're not middle of the table, we're not the bottom of the table. We're where we should be if we're the second largest authority in terms of our debt and other benchmarking, I think, in terms of our financial management of the organisation as well.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Do you want to come back, Councillor Carlisle?
Yeah, just an addition to what I said, and then thank you for that. I appreciate everyone's busy. Would it be possible to have some kind of briefing sheet circulated around councils, almost just articulating some of that stuff and because there's a lot of information in these reports. Would that be possible? Just in order to be able to answer people. And then my other question that's unrelated is what steps are being taken to ensure that the downward trend around council tax payment doesn't continue to go downwards, please?
Richard, do you want to pick this up?
In terms of the report, and we can pull something together, certainly there's the Oflog indicators that have been produced, but equally, I think there's a narrative there, as I iterate, the reference really with regard to things like debt, that just to get a bit of clarification and picking up on Councillor Cooper's point, I mean, it has to provide a bit of context to that because they are a little bit simplistic to that. In terms of the council tax side, what we've needed to, part of the issue in the past has perhaps been having to utilise staff to make payments for the sort of previous government with regard to energy and stuff like that have gone through council tax. So resources have been diverted on there. What we are now, we've recruited to make sure we've got a full complement of staff in there. They are focusing specifically on trying to recover debt and to put arrangements in place. And also there's been an increase in uplift in direct debits as well. So all of that should hopefully contribute towards improving the position.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, and just again to add to Richard's response, I know that we've got a number of members, a lot of newer members now that maybe haven't had that fuller briefing in terms of how the council budget process works and how its financial management works. So in the past, what we've done is had workshops for elected members, so we can add that to the training and development of members, and we'll take it through the Democratic Services Chair to add that to the sessions.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. At the pre-meeting, we did have a discussion on this item actually, and going forward, we suggested that we're going to be looking into like a workshop on understanding the figures and details, and a briefing note for future meeting as well. Thank you. And next on the list is Councillor Flynn.
Thanks, Asgar. I've got a couple of questions, Richard. Do you want me to do them via directorate rather than read them all out? Okay. There's not that many, I hasten to say. It's about the outturn 23-24, and I have to read it. I'm sorry, the figures are quite complex, so I couldn't learn them off by heart, I'm afraid. Adult social care, it's page 28, para 1-2 of the main report that we've got, the papers. It shows a figure of about £2 million not delivered in 5 of the budget action plans, basically, but the other 31 compensated for this mainly via income from residents. I just wonder how this was actually achieved, if this wasn't sort of anticipated in advance. And I appreciate this is adult social care, so you may not know the detail of it, but just in case. And in addition, I think that only 4.52 million of reserves were allocated to cover the deficit this year, but actually 10.25 were actually used. Could we have a bit more detail on that if you have it? I'll move on to children and families next.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the detail on the adult social care one, I'll have to come back to you with a response to that. And in terms of the reserves position, that's just showing the sort of net movements in those figures. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses in respect to that. So what I need to do is just expand that explanation for you and send it to you, if that's okay.
Thanks, Richard. I anticipated that. Similar kind of question on children and families. Again, an outturn report, page 30 and 31 of the main board papers and paragraph 1.3. £38 million overspend, which we're well aware of, the vast majority of which were down to children looked after and transport. And given that they're already showing an overspend of 18 million in Q1 this year, I'm going to say, is this sustainable? I know you can't answer that basically because it probably isn't, but I just wonder at the logic of those figures. 38 million last year, 18 million already this year, and doesn't seem to be much movement by way of actually meeting the budget gap that they've had for a number of years now.
Yeah, just in respect to that, obviously in terms of the position for 23-24, assumptions were made around various actions that the council was taking in terms of dealing with external residential placements, also in terms of fostering care as well, and also a sort of transport review. And some of those actions are taking slightly longer than were anticipated when the 24-25 budget was put together. But the reality is, I can assure Councillor Flynn, those actions are still being taken. So what we'd expect as we go through the financial year is that we'd start to see an impact of that in terms of starting to reduce that level of overspend. The reality is the actions are there; they're just taking slightly longer to deliver. And as a result of that, as well, obviously, clearly, the number of children looked after in terms of demand pressures is higher than we actually budgeted for as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Moving on to reserves, page 51, paragraph. Sorry.
Yeah, just 1 second, Councillor Cooper.
Sorry, Debbie.
That's okay. I just think that there perhaps is a need for some wider context here. So can I ask Mariana to come in, please?
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to add to what Richard's said, I mean, I think everybody knows how complicated children and families is and what's happening nationally and what has been happening nationally for some considerable time in terms of demand, particularly since COVID. I think I've said before at this board, our actual looked after children numbers as a whole aren't tracking too badly. Which is probably testament to the amount of preventative work that happens in the city and the restorative approach that colleagues take. And indeed, even our number of external placements, they are rising, but they're not rising necessarily in line with others. There are also additional pressures come from unaccompanied asylum seeking children, which we clearly have a legislative requirement and we would want to provide support to those children as well. But those are not things that are within the authority's control. At the same time, what has been happening, and we could provide a more detailed note if members wanted on this, it's the cost of the external placements that is rising. If you plot that on a graph, yes, the external placements are tracking upwards slightly, but not ridiculously and not too bad compared to others. But the cost of those external placements is rising significantly. And that's where a lot of the additional pressures are coming from, combined, as Richard has said, with there have been some delays to implementation on some of the things that we would like to get faster at. But these are complex things that we're trying to implement, and we're implementing them as fast as we possibly can. And we are more confident that things will track in the right direction later on.
Thank you. And Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing that further context in terms of the questions raised around children's. And Mariana just touched on the point that it's the actual cost of external placements that is increasing. And to be frank with Scrutiny Board members here, it's private profiteering that on the backs of vulnerable children that's happening. And so the cost of those placements is just increasing, sometimes daily or weekly and monthly at a time. And it's very difficult for us then to forecast what those costs may be in the longer term. In terms of mitigation, what the organisation are doing is trying to accelerate the programme of bringing external placements back into the city by use of, the smaller homes for children in the city, and also for, increasing fostering and kinship care and all of those things as well. And I think it's important also just to say, I know that Councillor Flynn said that we're already at £18 million projected overspend, but that's the projection for the end of the year if we didn't do anything. But if we do take mitigation and all those points that I mentioned about bringing children back into the city to be looked after in the city and the other measures that we're taking, then that will reduce as we go throughout the year. I think it's important also for scrutiny members to know that how open and transparent we are in terms of our financial reporting as an organisation. We take a report at every executive board on the financial position of the organisation that is open to public scrutiny as well as to internal scrutiny within the council as well. We don't have to do that. That's not a requirement that we have to do, but we think it's really important that we are open and transparent with what's happening, how we're managing the finances of the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Flynn, how many more questions have you got? Because there's other members that are waiting patiently as well, and I'll bring it back in as well. Okay, that's fine. Next one is Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a small one in the scheme of things, but page 39, legal services. Slightly concerned partly in terms of the service that is currently available because of outsourcing, that we're losing traded services potentially, and that we're spending almost as much on locum fees as we would be on staffing were we recruiting to posts, which feels like an expensive and short-term solution. I appreciate there is no easy solution, but just if there is any more detail on that would be helpful, because it's just slightly concerning. We've seen it in terms of the way TROs are handled if they've gone to Hull or Manchester, for example, whereas previously we were able to offer services elsewhere, from what I understand. Thank you.
Mariana?
Yeah, I mean, I might do your note, to be honest, Councillor Thompson, on the more detail of that one, or get Catherine to have a quick word with you. It's not just been the budget, kind of downward pressure on the budget that's resulted in some, some of the vacancies. Some of it's been recruitment and retention challenges. So even though we have wanted to recruit for all the reasons that you've said, we've then not been able to get the staff in, or, not immediately. And that's resulted in some of this. Catherine does manage the budget really, really tightly, and does only use the kind of locum route when she really, really needs to.
Thank you, Mariana. And Billy, do you want to, Councillor Flynn, do you want to come back? And then I will bring somebody, other members in as well. Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. I've got a few as well, although they are linked, sort of. So the first one I wanted to ask was transport. I have asked this before. It's useful to know how much of that overspend last year and going into this year is higher demand, so higher numbers, and could we have forecast that? And how much or how much is a higher price, and how much of that is internal charging? Because I think we established last year that some of the costs are coming through from a different department into children. So it's not really children that are overspending, it's the other department that's overspending, and we need to scrutinise that to understand that cost. So that was one. The other one is a quick one. Page 34, right at the top, it says something's being funded corporately, so it's not a children's and family pressure. I'd like to understand where it's being funded, because it's still got to be a pressure somewhere, I would imagine. And then the other two are probably linked. Again, it's children's and family, because that is where the biggest issues seem to be. And I understand, Councillor Cooper, what you're saying, that it's an £18 million overspend forecast now, and that it might get better, but history shows us that it doesn't. I mean, it was 38 million last year, and I seem to remember sitting here this time last year and being told again it was a forecast of 15 or 18 million that ends up at 38 million. So I appreciate there's activity undergoing to make sure it doesn't get worse, but history shows us that it probably will. So I guess there's a question there around, so how do we do our budgeting? Because we seem to get it wrong in children all the time. And I understand we don't always know the volume of children that are going to come to us or where they're going to come from. But we seem to consistently underestimate or under forecast how many children we're going to have to care for. And it would be better to overestimate it and be able to fund that cost than then run around in year trying to find those savings, because we don't find them, in all honesty, or we don't seem to. And then the last one, sorry, it's all linked, but on the children's and families, the placements with external providers. I was in a briefing call the other day, and what came up was this: how we communicate with our external providers, the number of children we expect them to need to care for. It appears to be peaky. So rather than saying at the start of the year, we need to contract with you to look after 110 children or 120 children or 10 children, whatever it is, we actually seem to go to them daily, weekly or monthly and say, right, this month it's 10. And now we're bringing some back. And then next month we'll say, actually, we've got 20. So they can't, there's not an economy of scale or a level, they can't contract for a year's worth of care. We're contracting it on an interim, bit by bit, which means we're not getting the best price we could get. So I don't know whether that, given the call was only last Friday, that's probably not an answer we've got, but it would be useful for it to come back at another briefing to this board. Sorry about that. Sorry, it was very long that. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. On the last item, I'll bring Robin as well later on after the officers have answered a few other questions you asked them before.
Yeah, I'll start, Councillor Chapman. In terms of the first question about kind of transport demand and planning, where the pressure is being felt. The pressure is mainly being felt in terms of increased demand. Obviously, in the last couple of years, there have been increased costs as well in terms of, kind of higher petrol, just with that kind of inflationary costs and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, the cost of our transport provision is regarded to be in line with, in line with others and reasonably and good value for money. But it is that demand that is driving it, particularly on SEND and, as a result of EHCP plans. So that's the answer to the first question. I think in terms of the answer to the others around, can we be better at budgeting? I mean, we're always looking for ways that we can improve our financial planning and monitoring. As you know from previous conversations, I think the bottom line on this one, though, it is demand. It's what is happening out in society, and that is very, very difficult for us to control and indeed predict. You know, and it's again, you know, we're not the only authority that struggles on that. And you know, you could do all sorts of modelling, but if something happens in society, then actually the modelling won't necessarily come to bear fruit. I think we have set out in the sufficiency strategy, this links into the point you made about providers and engagement. The sufficiency strategy that went to executive board, I think it was just last month in June, did try and set out what our approach to that is on a planned basis. But again, it is a bit of an art rather than a science. And so we do just need to continually be quite dynamic. I mean, I guess, you know, there could be a choice of, you know, we provide greater funds, but what that would mean if we then over provided, we would potentially have cut other services unnecessarily. So it is a judgment, you know, particularly between Julie with her statutory responsibilities and Victoria with her statutory responsibilities, to navigate through what is that optimum position in terms of provision for those children who need it versus our Section 151 responsibilities to always deliver a legally balanced budget. And, you know, all I can say to you is we do that absolutely to the best of our ability, using as many tools and benchmarking and, you know, kind of engagement as we possibly can. But I don't know how we would get any better at that unless we were able to, you know, literally predict the future.
Thank you, Mariana. Richard, do you want to add any?
Yeah, just to add to that, really, obviously, when we're pulling together the budget, we have to make certain assumptions around demand levels and also sort of delivery of some of the actions with regard we've talked about in-house provision, bringing back people within the sort of city boundaries. The main point I was going to make actually was just around those challenges that Mariana outlined that I've referenced as well. These aren't unique to Leeds, and some of the conversations I have with other core cities, they're in exactly the same position, trying to get a robust budget as possible within the timescales and given the sort of pressures that I've talked about. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to what Mariana and Richard have said, really, I think there were a number of questions there, Councillor Chapman, around children's services. I think in terms of the transport, we can get you some further information on that one. The demand has increased significantly since COVID for children requiring transport to educational settings and so on like that. But we can make sure we give you some further information on that if you would like it. I think some of your assumptions that we seem to get the forecasting wrong in terms of what the overspend may be. I know that officers have said to you that it's a demand-led service. It absolutely is. This is about vulnerable children we're talking about here. And in Leeds, we have, as you know, we're an outstanding authority in terms of looking after children. So if there's a need arises that a child might need to be placed in an expensive placement, and some of these placements can be up to £500,000, you know, for their specific needs, you know, are really expensive. And if that happens, you know, with a few children in 1 month, then that's something that we can't necessarily forecast that might happen in that particular month or that particular year. And as Mariana said, and if we did, that would mean then that we'd have to get more savings from other directorates to make sure that we have a forecast balanced budget at the end of the year. It is a fine balance. It's a fine balance between what do you forecast the need is going to be for vulnerable children to come into the authority's care and what that need might be, what kind of external placements prices might well be. But we can't certainly I take exception to that we always get it wrong. I think we've got a fantastic team that work for us in the financial side of this council. And I don't think it's necessarily that we get it wrong. I think the funding for children's care has been wrong for 14 years. And it's been, in a crisis mode for at least the last 5 years that I'm aware of in terms of funding for children. It is a national issue. We are not alone. Many authorities, even neighbouring authorities to Leeds, are also struggling with the costs of children's and family services in their city, or indeed in trying to place them. And also the point that you made, Councillor Chapman, about maybe can we contract and block book, I think was the point you were making. But in the Children's Directorate, and I know if they were here, what they'd be saying to that. It's about individual children and what their wraparound needs are at the time that they present, or indeed as they're being monitored and evaluated throughout their care, because it changes. Their needs changes as time goes on, and also and when they present, they need to be looked at as individuals and not block booked by the 100.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And Councillor Chapman, your question were related to the Children and Family Scrutiny Board. They would have gone really into details. But however, we've got Rob here, who sat next to me on my right-hand side, and he's a support officer for Children and Family Scrutiny Board as well, and he'll be updating you on that one as well.
Yeah, just briefly, Councillor Chapman. Yeah, I'm well placed to sort of take some of those additional information questions forward, so I'm happy to do that. But just to provide a bit of assurance from scrutiny perspective, really. So the children looked after sufficiency strategy that Mariana referred to came to our board last week. So there was quite significant discussion of all the issues that have been covered by Councillor Cooper and others. So I guess it is being scrutinised there as well.
Thank you. Do you want to come back briefly?
I just want to say, I do understand these are individual children and they've all got their needs. And I am not saying at all ever that we should not look after the children that need looking after. I'm just querying, which is what we're here to do, if there is anything else we can do to give us more certainty over our numbers in what, as you repeatedly tell us, Councillor Cooper, is a difficult time and a difficult situation. But to consistently overspend by £40 million, with most of it in one department, does merit further scrutiny at times, but I accept it's not this board. There was one question I did ask, which was about something being funded corporately.
Thank you. I want to pick that one up.
Top of page 32.
You're right, Councillor Chapman. That is obviously, if it's spend, then it has to be funded. So that has been funded through a contribution from reserves, and that sort of contains in with the sort of the movement in the reserves position. I think there was recognition just in terms of that position on that particular action. There was just delays in terms of the delivery of the saving in 23-24. So the decision was taken to fund that through a contribution from reserves in this case. But there is a cost, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Just on that item, as the Children's Services budget is under pressure, are we lobbying the new government, and is there for additional funding, Councillor Cooper, or officers?
Yeah, I mean, the material that
Councillor Hamilton, if you've got a question, just put your hand up and I will bring you in as well. Just Marianne.
Sorry, the material that we shared, I think last year, where we, did the analysis where, the children looked after the external placements, the cost of those external placements, very much was used to influence the previous government. And we're certainly, wanting to influence this group as much as possible. A lot of that comes through the relevant professional associations. So both Caroline and Julie and Victoria, actually, through SIPFA, the Association of Directors of Children's Social Care and the Association of Directors of Children's Adult Social Care, those professional bodies are in a way one of the best opportunities to influence, because that's where it's not just a Leeds thing. It's actually those professional bodies as a whole saying that the system isn't funded appropriately. So yes, we will be influencing and continue to influence as much as we possibly can, but also we'll be doing it through those sector bodies, the LGA, that kind of thing, to make sure it's not just seen as Leeds whinging, which potentially it could be doing, and we wouldn't want that to be the case.
Thank you, Marianne. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair, and I just want to remind Scrutiny Board members actually that the budget that we are working towards, that you've seen the figures for this morning, the Q1 figures for, is the settlement from the previous government. So we're working under those financial constraints just the same. Having said that, of course, as an organisation, we will lobby government as a council, but also in terms of those other bodies that Mariana talks about, through the professional ones, but also through the LGA, in terms if there is an issue with funding, such as children's, that the government become aware of it through those mechanisms as well. But I must remind you that we are still working under the constraints of the settlement we received last December from the government, and we won't get another settlement until the end of the year from the government.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Palmer.
I don't want to do this to death, but it was about the same issue of looked after children. But first of all, Richard, thanks so much for your report. And I think it's clear to us all that management of the council finances is being done excellently by all the different departments. I suppose two very quick points. One, we had an excellent report last year about these small homes in the council being developed. I just wondered if, I might have missed it in the report, I just wondered if there was any room in the budget to develop that this year. And secondly, totally take on board what Councillor Cooper says about profiteering, and also the fact that we need to wait until the end of the year for another settlement from the new government. So my question is, clearly it is private profiteering, but previous to the Tory government, was there a different, I'm guessing there was a different model to looked after children. Is it possible that we could return to that, or are we stuck now with this kind of private provision?
Yeah, no, let me try and answer Councillor Panner. The first one, in terms of small group living, that is one of the areas, as Richard has outlined, that it's taken us longer to do than we had hoped. There are some reasons within our control that we're working on to increase the pace of that, and there are some reasons outside of our control that we're working on to improve the pace of that. If I give you a couple of examples, inside our control, we have now got the sort of getting the property, getting the staff in much better aligned and much more proactive. So we're confident we'll be able to go faster. The thing that's outside of our control, just to try and bring this to life for colleagues, is that you've got to have an Ofsted registration. And I think there's one, I think it might be one in Councillor Cooper's ward, where I think we're about 20 weeks we've been waiting for the Ofsted registration, because understandably, lots of councils are doing that. So there's a backlog, as you would, reasonable to expect. That's the kind of thing where Julie's really working with the other DCSs to influence Ofsted to try and make sure that those registrations happen faster, so that then we've then got children and young people whose needs could be met in that small group living, but you can't get the Ofsted registration. And clearly, as Councillor Cooper said earlier, having an outstanding rating for children and families doesn't come easy. And one of the things you would have to be very, very, very careful about doing is putting placing children in unregistered provision. So you're just balancing that kind of safeguarding risk with the the financial risk. So that hopefully that explains the small group living, and so actually we are expanding the numbers of small group living homes that we are looking to deliver in this year and next year, because in some ways, having too many of those kind of placements would be a nice problem to have, if I could put it that way. So colleagues are working really, really hard on that. In terms of the alternative model, I'm trying to think when I did work in children's services, because it was probably, it's about 10, 12 years ago, but probably not 14 years ago. I think the model for children and for looked after children, the numbers and the requirements for external placements have increased massively during that period. So I don't think I mean, it's, historically has been a challenge, but I think the nature of that challenge and the extremity of that challenge has increased significantly over that time period. And certainly some of the lobbying has been about a more regulated market, because the adults market is more regulated. So there are things that perhaps would be in control of a national policy context that could make quite a big difference. Does that answer?
Thank you. Next on the list is Councillor Flynn, and briefly I'll bring Councillor Chapman in, and then we'll make a line under this agenda item.
Thanks, Asgar. Won't make that mistake again, giving way. Just a couple of things. I just want to emphasise that I didn't criticise at any stage in my earlier comments anything that the council were doing, or either the two directorates. Basically, I'm asking the questions because the medium-term financial strategy does talk about the council being at high risk of not achieving a balanced budget over that period of time, although I know there's no immediate danger of a Section 114 notice. So I just wanted to make that clear. And also that I do appreciate that adult social care and children and families directorates are demand-led, and to a certain extent, you cannot anticipate what's around the corner. Fully understand all of that. So just making that point before I move on. Reserves, Richard, page 51, para 9 of the main papers, a reduction in the total reserves of around 20%, 44.5 million. What's the operational boundary, if there is one, of the reserves we cannot breach?
In terms of earmark reserves and ring fence reserve, ring fence could be for schools or housing revenue accounts, so they have to be separate to general fund. Earmark reserves are set up for a specific purpose, and clearly when that purpose comes along, then that reserve will be depleted. Things like insurance reserve, or equally things. There's some of the social care, adult social care reserves as well that were set aside for specific purposes. So you'd expect to see movements in that. In terms of the council's general reserve position, we do a calculation that's been agreed with Grant Thornton and our previous auditors as well, KPMG, where we look at the risks, we look at the likelihood of it happening, and we put a sum of money aside, and we do that across all the directorates to determine a level of resource that we need within our general reserve. And then compare that to the level of resources that we've got. So in terms of that position, in terms of that calculation, the level of resource that we've got within the general reserve at the moment of 36 million is consistent with what that calculation that we've done around risk and impact. But clearly we do want to make the authority as robust and as resilient and as sustainable as possible. So we have got a strategy that's in the medium-term financial strategy. Despite all the other pressures that we've outlined, we will still continue to contribute £3 million to the general reserve, and that moves forward in the current new financial year, and also in all the years covered by the medium-term financial strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Cooper.
Yeah, sorry, if I can just respond to Councillor Flynn's first comments, and I absolutely accept that there was no criticism at all in your questioning, Councillor Flynn. I was just providing extra clarity and context because your questions were quite specific. So I just thought that Scrutiny Board members would benefit from that wider context. But I accept there were no criticism in them at all.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for clarifying that as well. And Bill, I need to move on now, please. Councillor Chapman, please.
Similar to Councillor Flynn, I just wanted to say my comments were not a criticism of the finance team or any of our directorates. I think they're working really well under an awful situation that we appear to be in. And the finance reports and analysis we get now are immeasurably improved on what we got several years ago. So I'd just like to say thank you to the finance team as well.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Yeah, Councillor Flynn.
To say, Asgar, I mean, we're here to scrutinise, and I hadn't finished doing my little bit of scrutinising. So if we're not allowed to ask all of the questions, then clearly this begs the question of why we're actually here.
I mean, you can ask as many questions as you like, Councillor Flynn, but we've been discussing this item over about an hour now, and we've got other. It's a bigger agenda pack this morning, and if you've got some more questions, you can ask. Yes, no problem.
I do think that the budget is probably the biggest question that any of us has to sort of look at. It's a relatively easy one this time, Richard. The strategic and central account showed an underspend of 44.7 million. I poured through the documents, but I can't actually calculate where that came from. Can you give us a brief synopsis of what it is, please?
I'm just getting to the page, sorry. Yeah, we can provide some of the detail on that, but contained within that position, it includes the contributions from reserve, the net Merrion House reserve of 5.2 million. That within strategic and central accounts, it's got the 17.7 million pound contribution in there as well. It's also got the contributions from earmarked reserves, and it's also got the underspend of the 17.8 million pounds in the debt budget. So remember one of the slides that I showed earlier showed the directorate overspend and the money coming in, and there was another slide that sort of bullet pointed the key issues within that, and broadly those are the key areas that contribute towards that 44 million. So anything that's not directorate specific will go through strategic. And that's where we bring all the reserves or an external contribution from WICA by way of example. And all the debt costs are in there as well.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn, and thank you, Richard. Thank you once again, Richard, for introducing the report and answering the question as well. Before I close this agenda item, can I ask Councillor Cooper, does she want to make any final comments?
Just to thank Scrutiny Board for their questions today and for their understanding of what the pressures are within the council, particularly around children. So I'll leave it there, given as time is marching on, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommendation on page 17 of our agenda.
Sorry, Chair, and Marianne has got.
Oh, Marianne.
Can I just reassure members as well that, as an officer corps, this is absolutely front and centre. It's absolutely dominating our agenda, and has done for some considerable years. And we've gone really, really big again on the communications, as Richard outlined earlier, to make sure that we do contain the in-year overspend as much as we possibly can. But that will have consequences. It will have consequences for services, and it will have consequences for your inboxes as well as for our inboxes. So it's important that we do front that up, because there will be things that we can't afford as a consequence of this. But just to reassure you that, we're working really hard on it to minimise the impact.
Thank you, Mariana. The recommendation on page 17 of agenda pack, are we happy to approve? Yep, thank you. We can now move on to item 8, which is the report of our integrated digital service providing an update of their work and priorities. We have a presentation to support this item. Andrew, it's over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Can you go to the second slide, please, Rob? So I've pulled out the key points from the report on a few slides to go through. So IDS, which is the Integrated Digital Service, plays a crucial role in supporting the ambitions of Leeds City Council by underpinning the delivery of services to the citizens, businesses and visitors to Leeds. The service helps the city achieve its goals by providing essential support services, managing project changes, protecting against cyber attacks, ensuring information governance, offering digital leadership, analysing data, fostering digital learning and overseeing line of business applications. RDS is committed to using digital technology as a key enabler to help the city and the council realise their vision for the future. So I've pulled out some key themes, the first being governance. So we have new governance arrangements in IDS, which aims to improve decision making within the council, prioritise programmes and projects across directorates. For example, we have a design authority which David chairs, which has been established to review all new work and ensure adherence to our design principles, which emphasise user-centric, efficient and secure digital options. There's also a new digital board that's been introduced, attended by chief officers from each directorate, which is intended to align our digital enablement within the city ambition and the council's organisational plan, and it also tries to do some prioritisation. Just in terms of structure, because we've seen a change this year, the previous CDIO left in January and I was appointed into an interim role since then, so 6 months in now. And since taking on the role, I've been working with Mariana as the Director of Strategy and Resources and my SLT and the wider service to sort of do a reset and redesign of the service and baseline it. And that includes creating a new technology strategy approach and integrating into the organisational plan. We've also, as part of Strategy and Resources, realigned some teams into other areas. So we've got a single accountability within the Strategy and Resources Directorate, which is intended to facilitate more agile decision making and clearer reporting structures for staff. This is a busy slide, so I won't read through it all, but it's just to point out we've got 3 key capital schemes in IDS. There's the ESP, which is the Essential Services Programme, and that's intended to keep us secure and refresh our technology. So everything from your phone through to your desktop device, through to server infrastructure and technologies in the data centres. We've also got a cloud and application compliance programme, which is an initiative to modernise and secure our digital services. It's focusing on transition away from on-premise or in the data centre to more cloud provision services. And it allows us to ensure we're compliant with things like GDPR and security frameworks. And then the final programme is the Digital Efficiencies Programme, and that focuses on digitisation of services to have like more modern online channels to facilitate efficiencies across the authority. Technology strategy. Should have asked you to read this, but I'll do it. It's David's first time at Scrutiny today, by the way. IDS technology strategy is focused on transforming the way Leeds City Council operates by using digital technology to make the organisation more efficient. So we're moving to multiple cloud platforms like Azure and AWS or Amazon. We're maximising use of products like a Microsoft Power Platform, Dynamics, Local Gov Drupal, Genesis, which is the new telephony service we've rolled out earlier in the year into the contact centre and elsewhere, and Microsoft 365. And we're developing solutions that can be reused across other service areas. We're trying to get away from point solutions. We want to be reusing. And we're modernising and streamlining the council's technology in a bid to reduce the number of systems used by staff and reduce the overall cost. Overall, the technology changes are aimed at simplifying technology, remove cost, and innovate by using existing platforms and capabilities. The goal is to reduce the number of technologies, invest in people, and deliver change faster. So pulling out again from the report some service achievements. There's lots in here, but through each team that are working to me, so digital change with improved organisational support for mission critical business applications. We've also combined our apps teams in with the product management teams to improve ways of working within those teams. 100% digital leads, that comes to Scrutiny separately, and there's a report that I've referenced in the report back you have. We're just pulling out some key things there. They've worked with partners to secure over £3 million in funding for community organisations. They've supported 247 partner organisations last year, helping tens of thousands of people. And the work they do really is class leading in terms of digital leads and the inclusion work they do. Service desk, again, we've reported separately here through Scrutiny, and I've linked into that report, but we've improved the service that they're providing. They're regularly hitting all of their KPIs for service now, and we have a drop-in clinic in the Civic and a dedicated phone line. We're working with HR on the training programme going into the Be Your Best programme. we are going to put something together there specifically for members as well as part of that to ensure that the training comes through to all of the member group. Next slide, please, Rob. Strategy innovation team. They were created to create a strategic direction for the use of digital technology across the council and the Leeds Integrated Care Board. So they've led a number of digital innovation workshops and hackathons and events to co-design solutions for independent living and productivity. They run we have run for the last 2 years, a digital health and social care event in the city, which was cost-free. It was all covered by sponsorship, and we had some world-renowned speakers there and over 200 delegates. And they're also supporting the development of the data strategy with the Office of Data Analytics. We're doing a piece of work right now with the use of Microsoft AI Assistant, which is called Microsoft 365 Copilot, and we've got 300 council staff on that pilot as we speak, assessing it for whether we will invest further. The ODA, or the Office of Data Analytics, they've developed a social progress index to assess progress against the best city ambition. They've created the Leeds Insight Hub, which is a secure city data platform for sharing reports, and applied predictive modelling to health and care data. It plans to broaden that out more across the city. Thank you, Rob. So in conclusion, we believe IDS has a clear vision for the future. We're aiming to be a key enabler for both the City of Leeds and the Council, using digital technology to support the city's ambitions and the Council's organisational goals. The ambition is to make the services easier, cheaper and faster for everyone. We emphasise creating a user-centric environment that encourages intuitive and multi-channel options. And the focus is to leverage technology and automation to simplify operations, realise savings and comply with security and regulatory standards. We also aim to reduce legacy investments and transition to cloud, ensuring that digital services are efficient and secure. We're invested heavily in digital skills for staff and for the people of Leeds, so everyone can engage with technology on their own terms. And that includes establishing clear roles and responsibilities within IDS to teams, focus on skills development and fostering an agile, collaborative working culture to learn and improve quickly. And finally, IDS's vision and plans are about making the most of digital opportunities to improve the lives for people in Leeds and enhance the operations of the council. Thank you. Sorry, that was a lot of speaking.
Thank you, Andrew, for introducing the report and then running through the presentation. And we welcome David to our Scrutiny board as well. And do you want to add anything on this item, David, as well?
No, thank you. I think Andrew covered it really well. Just here to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you. If we turn your mic off, yeah. I've got, yes, I will open to the board members for any comments and questions. And first one is Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on page 94, number 30, bullet point 30, with regards to the delivery of the customer contact phone. It's saying that this is being used elsewhere. How is it going? Because I'm still getting complaints from residents that when they ring, the telephone's just ringing and ringing out and ringing off. You know, when I was last on this board, this was the issue that was raised with regards to the telephone just ringing out, and I was assured that when it went digital, that some of that will change. So it says here that some have been trialed. Can you tell me where, so that when we ring, if I go and ring this afternoon, it won't just ring out? So that's on that one. And then I had, oh, I'll come back because I can't find it at this moment.
Andrew, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hamilton. We put Genesis in initially to replace the as-is, so anywhere it was used, so the contact centre, business support centre, IDS, our service desk. But we quickly identified there were service improvements elsewhere, so there are other service lines that have now come forward who want to use the telephony solution. So we've got a number of areas, the bereavement service taking it up. It's been used in some of the housing options lines, and we're working through those as we speak. So in the technology strategy, we talk about reuse of technology. So Genesis as a platform, we do want to reuse it and push it out wider. So everyone can benefit from use of that technology and address the issues you're talking about, Councillor Hamilton, where lines get answered.
Mariana, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to add to Andrew's answer there, Councillor Hamilton, I think the most recent update to this board, I think was just earlier this calendar year, actually, on the contact centre. We weren't able to get a visit, unfortunately, for members to the contact centre just because of some of the challenges we had around Merrion House building and access, but that reported significant improvements in answer rates the majority of the time. I'd have to look back at what the actual figures were. I haven't got those to the top of my head, but it was really significant, and customer feedback was also rising in the right direction, just gradually, but you know, it was going in the right direction. And the other thing, just to note, that the responsibility for the contact centre is now transferred from myself to James and from Councillor Cooper to Councillor Harland. So it'll be the subject of scrutiny through the Communities Board.
Well, can I ask, is that, I know you said housing option was mentioned, etc. Is that being used at the community hubs for housing? Because last week someone complained with regards, it's just ringing and ringing and ringing through.
I don't know whether it's used at the community hubs. We'll take that away and do you a bit of a note, but that would be the subject of a Communities Board rather than this board going forward. But we'll provide you a note on the kind of factual whether it is or isn't used.
Thank you, Mariana. I've got on the list is Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. It sort of follows on from that, but it was a more system specific question, but it does relate to that question. So the example I've got is the housing team are getting more queries from residents or tenants because they can't get through to the housing options people. So they end up bringing housing, who then contact housing options to get an update, and they have to go through the phone system as well, because there are two different systems within, or at least two different systems within housing, and the housing managers cannot access the housing options system, so they can't see where repairs got to. So we've got multiple steps where really, one, they should be able to get through in the first place so they don't go somewhere else, but two, I'm told it's a license issue. So if we have different systems, do we have enough licenses? Well, we clearly don't have enough licenses for some of our staff to be able to access another system to get an update without having to go through another person. Do you see what I mean? They've been told it's because there's not enough licenses for the secondary system, so they're not allowed to access it for an update. So I guess the question is, have we got sufficient licenses, and is that the best way to fix a short-term problem if we can resolve some of the other systems issues as we integrate them?
Andrew?
It's a bit complicated. Yeah,
Thanks,
confused
Councillor.
that.
No, it's fine, Councillor. I'll need to take that away and look into the specific issue. Just in terms of all these service lines moving on to Genesis, it obviously takes time because each one's a specific project. So, you know, we've done 18, or we're going to be doing 18, but there will be more potentially out there where we can then make the other, you know, there's improvements that come with the use of that technology. But I'd have to take that away and come back with a note. Perhaps we can pick up with the other comment.
Thank you. I've got next Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thanks, Chair. Just moving the conversation away to digital services a bit more. The trial of Microsoft AI Assistant is quite interesting. I asked a question similar to that to a different department last year, and I was told that there was no trial plan, so this must be a relatively new thing. And I just wondered if the trial results are coming to this committee or to members when they're expected to feed back, and what it actually entails, because obviously in the short term it's good to help workers with their day-to-day, but in the medium and long term it's good for savings. So.
Happy enough to bring the outcome back and show you the report, the outcome from the Copilot trial. Microsoft Copilot is only one of the technologies that we're trialing around AI. We're using a range of AI technologies to improve, or hopefully improve, front door services. And we're looking at other areas where we might be able to apply the same technology to be able to capture data from front door services in a standard format to make it easier for us to interpret and improve our ability to be able to assess and respond. The savings and efficiencies that we can see from Copilot largely are around content generation. So drafting emails, interpreting and understanding large reports and emails. So it's really specifically targeted towards heavily administrative functions where we can see that there are efficiencies. But as I say, we've trialed it with a broad range of workers across different service areas, and have got feedback on where it will be useful and where it won't. So what we might look to do is a more targeted rollout into areas where we can see that there's specific savings that can be achieved.
Yeah, the way I describe Copilot, it's almost like an infant. It's very, very new. So it is quite specific where you'll see the benefit at the minute. So as David said, for drafting emails, reading reports, things like that. But it is going to evolve. So what we need to understand is before we make a big investment in those licenses, quite whether it's got over that tipping point where it's going to help somebody, say in legal or someone in finance, because it can't do analysis on a spreadsheet yet. It can help you design a spreadsheet, but it can't do the analysis. When it can do things like that, it will fundamentally change the way we work, but it's not there yet.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Flynn, and then Councillor Chapman.
I doubt you'll be able to answer because I didn't mention this during our pre-meet with regards to the outage that took place over the weekend for the airport, hospital, etc. And we weren't affected in that way. So my question was, which I know you won't be able to answer, is what have we got in place to prevent that? But I was told that you won't be able to answer, but you can give me an update. You can answer what we've done differently and to prevent us having such attack.
Perhaps I'll start them. Maybe you can finish off, David. We don't use the CrowdStrike software. We use Trellix. You might remember that is McAfee, and it rebranded to Trellix a number of years ago. So we've been using that for quite some time. So we were not affected because we don't use the CrowdStrike software, and specifically the Falcon agent on the desktop. If we had been using it, we'd have been able to visit every device. So it would have been a significant outage for the authority. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. We did have one service that was affected, and it's one that we outsource, which is our PALS system for performance of staff, objective setting, training, and so on. That system went out. It is not mission critical, so it was largely unnoticed on the day. And of course, we were affected by banks and BACS transfers where they'd been affected because they do use this software. So it wasn't without impact. We had a major incident team that stood up so we could monitor the situation. We did have a team rally around it from around 7:30 in the morning, and we were monitoring if there were any issues that came as sort of ancillary or secondary issues as a result of the outage. We were aware that EMIS was down on the health side, and there was likely an impact to Leeds residents there, where they were potentially struggling to book appointments with doctors and things like that. So we were involved in the group that were struggling as a result of that as well.
Okay, Mariana, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to add in terms of Councillor Hamilton's point about broader kind of cyber threats, and as Andrew's slides cover, we do invest a fair bit in our checks and balances to manage the cyber risk. Though clearly, as Friday's shown for loads of organisations, it's impossible to literally de-risk everything. So we do invest what we believe is a proportionate amount. You know, we do a lot of sharing and best practice with other people across the industry to make sure that we're always on the front foot. And I know Andrew has a presentation that shares, like, we do get attacked, but you know, some of those attacks are resisted, but and we'd be happy to provide a private briefing if members wanted more information about that. And maybe if I can just pick up on Councillor Hinchcliffe's suggestion about the AI, etc. We are, as Andrew and David have said, we're doing it quite carefully, because there's quite a significant information governance aspects to it as well, and people still being responsible even though it's computer generated. You know, so if you draft me you send me a letter and I get Copilot to draft something, it's still my responsibility for what goes in that. So, and we can't give that away. That's, you know, as the organisation. So we need to navigate our way through all of those issues to make sure, especially in those more complex, sensitive areas, that we're using machine learning or artificial intelligence appropriately and in a safe way.
Thank you, Mariana. Next on the list is Councillor Flynn.
Oscar, I think you've covered the risk sort of issue that somebody raised before. I like your confidence, basically. I just wonder if you're so confident of the system, how come spam emails are able to get through to us on a fairly sort of regular basis? And on a much more simplistic sort of basis, why can't we send an email with an attachment to ourselves or to somebody else in the council without it being stopped for security reasons, for no apparent reason, and taking hours to actually to come through? One more following that.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Spam emails, the spam engine is updated regularly, but it doesn't capture everything all the time. So sometimes things just come through because they're so new. I haven't got the metrics of how many hundreds of thousands of spam emails we receive a day, but it is hundreds of thousands, and you can only get ahead of what you see. So some will get through. In terms of your second point about attachments, it's to do with the size of the attachment. So if it's over a certain size, I'm pretty sure it's 10 meg, I'll have to check, it will get quarantined and then released. That's to keep our system secure and running effectively. If you've got any specific examples, though, Councillor Flynn, as ever, if you contact me, I'll have a look into it for you.
But didn't catch the bit you said there was. It was to do with the size of the attachment. Did you say?
Yeah, correct.
I'm talking about Word documents.
Yeah, but it still could be the size of that.
It's a letter. You know, just less than a page.
If you send me the example, Councillor Flynn, I'll look into that for you to see what's going on.
Okay. Second one. Thank you very much. I know IT have got a language of their own, but I really would prefer, for you to use plain English. Just looking at the conclusion paper that you put up before on the presentation, just look at paragraphs 2 and 3 about reduce legacy investments and transitions to cloud platforms, ensuring that digital services are efficient and secure. Emphasizes creating a user-centric environment that encourages intuitive and multi-channel solutions. What on earth is that all about?
I can pick this one up. So we're looking to, let's say, historically we've made decisions in each service area to purchase software solutions only for that service area. So we'll buy a case management system that only applies, for example, to children's or to adults, and it doesn't give us any broader benefit. So what we're looking at doing is replacing with systems that give us a much broader benefit across all service areas. So we're more joined up across the council. We're also looking to provide a better digital offering. So a customer portal where you can log on and see every interaction that you've had. You can access the digital services. You'll be able to see the progress of your ask of the council, and monitor your services that you've requested. User-centric is putting ourselves in the mindset of a resident of Leeds or a business owner within Leeds and asking what we'd expect of that portal. What services should I be able to access? What information should I be able to see? What would help me go about my day and request services of the council and interact with the council? We'd like to move. So one of the questions earlier was around telephony and being able to get through to people. And, you know, demand is something that obviously we're looking to shift towards digital channels where people can self-serve. Then they should be able to access via a website, via a digital service, and be able to start that transaction on a digital service rather than need to make a phone call. Hopefully what that does is it frees up our contact center to allow them to be able to respond to calls much more quickly.
Mariana?
Yeah, just to add, certainly I did go through an earlier version with Andrew and try and plain English it a little bit. So apologies, Councillor Flynn, if we haven't quite got everything. I guess the only other thing to say, you know, this would using language of the sector as a whole, the same as you would, you know, in social care or education, because we're trying to be, you know, not just a local authority, we're trying to learn from the best, etc. So, but we'll take that feedback on board, as always, Councillor Finn, and, you know, try and make things plainer and more straightforward next time.
Yeah.
I am but a simple scouser, which is probably why I asked all those questions. Really, all I want to do, and I think all any member of the public wants to do, is to read emails or to get someone to answer the phone when they have a query. And if the website was better than it is, and that's not your problem, it's donkey's years old, it doesn't seem to have got any better to me, then people wouldn't have to use the phone and we wouldn't be sending so many emails out. So maybe if we started right at the basic level, you know, how do you actually communicate with people and how do they communicate with us, and get that right before we start all the flying off to the cloud and all the rest of it, I think we'd be in a much better position. No need to come back.
Thank you. David, just last point, you mentioned that we want to make sure signpost people to digital websites and getting away from contact by phone calls. But there are some communities whose English is not their first language, or they don't have the access to the online, you know. What plans do we have for those communities and for those areas?
Thank you. One of the things that we're trialing, actually one of the benefits that we can see from AI and large language models, is the ability to translate back and forth on the fly. So you can ask a question in your native language and we'll be able to search our knowledge bases, our information, and then reply back in your native language. And that's one of the proofs of concept that we're building that will use Gen AI. We've already been working with Amazon around a Q&A bot that has that capability. But as I say, you know, we're early days with AI to understand how it might apply to that kind of a challenge and be able to deliver services.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you. Yeah, my question was actually about accessing some of the council systems online from our own devices. I ask this regularly, so I don't expect it to change very much, but I use my own laptop to do my emails, and I don't use my council laptop. The only time I use it is to access Insight and shared drives. Now, is there any way or any plans to move that onto our own devices? Because it makes life simpler, and it's also cheaper because then you don't need 99 laptops necessarily.
Part of moving to cloud will give you that capability of being able to access systems from your own device. So by moving it out of our data center and into a public cloud offering, it gives us the opportunity to open it up to bring your own device and improve your access to those systems. Insight, I think, was one of the examples. I use Insight from my own device. Maybe if we can catch up after, there are some aspects of Insight that obviously you need to be on VPN to be able to access them. Certainly file shares and things like that are inside our data center, you wouldn't be able to access those. So occasionally where policy documents refer to a file share, you wouldn't be able to access that from your own device. But we are gradually moving those services into Microsoft 365, which is our preferred collaboration platform. Insight is targeted to move to Microsoft 365, so it will be in public web. And then you'll be able to access it without the same sort of constraints on file shares and things like that. Yeah.
And do we have any timeline or time scale on that?
It really comes down to prioritization. There's quite a lot being built out on the SharePoint instance that we've got in our data center, and we're gradually moving site by site over. The Insight program has started. We've appointed a business SRO as well as a technology SRO onto the program. There's a team that have already started work analyzing the options there, and we're working with Microsoft and what they call a fast track engagement to be able to understand the best way of architecting the new solution inside Insight. Yeah, very keen to take input on that because we want it to be as usable as possible.
Diana, do you want to add anything?
I was just going to add to Councillor Chapman's point. Some of the times we are balancing what we talked about earlier in terms of cyber risk with being as accessible as possible on as many devices as possible. And I guess that's where the judgment call comes. So influencing the timetable that David's talked about is just making sure that those security checks and balances are in place to protect ourselves as much as anything else.
Thank you, Andrew and David, for introducing the report and also presentation and answering our questions. Before we move on to another item agenda, can I ask Councillor Cooper if she's got any comments to make or add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm pleased to get through a IDS report without Councillor Flynn mentioning AI, I've got to say. Because I know that he has some concerns about the use of AI, and of course the great benefits that AI can bring needs to be balanced with the questions that it does raise about how actually we manage AI within the organisation, and it has to be fit for purpose, doesn't it? So it's got to do what we want it to do and achieve what needs to be achieved, but it could potentially bring some good savings to the council. I think a number of things were talked about in the report, and particularly around the contact centre and the telephony and the changeover to the new telephony system as well that's been put in place. So we will take those questions away that members have had issues rising from one service area not speaking to the other service area, because that shouldn't be happening. So we'll take those away for you as well. I just wanted to point out actually that the issue around cyber attacks has been recognised in our corporate risk register, and it is an increase in risk. So albeit we are fairly confident in recent attacks that we have managed to be able to restrain from them. But we don't know about the future, and whatever cyber attacks may be, they're very quick at thinking up new ways of hacking into systems and so on, as you see on the news on a regular basis. So that has been recognised in our risk register as well. And I just wanted to thank the team actually, and Andrew coming in as the new chief officer here and taking over. and really making a big difference in the team and in the council about, you know, how we're providing you know, digital services across the council and the city. I think you've made a big impact already, and I hope that will continue. And just for scrutiny members to know, actually, this huge transformation, isn't there, from you know, traditional services to digital services. So whether that be, you know, through your digital devices that many of you have got here with you today, or you know, even indeed your telephones and your smartphones and so on like that. And we have to keep pace with that. So like I say, we've got a great team. Please pass our thanks on to the team for all that they're doing at the moment as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Can I also echo on behalf of the board, just pass our thanks to your team as well for keeping, you know, our IT system safe as well. And I hope you enjoyed the scrutiny board this morning, David, and do welcome in future as well. Thank you, everyone. Are we happy with the report recommendation on page 91? Yep. Okay, thank you. Now we are moving to agenda item 9, which provides an opportunity to look into details of the update being our best organisation plan. I will ask Alex and Mariana to run through the presentation and report as well, introduce the report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll start with this one. I'll be as quick as I possibly can because I appreciate that people have been sat for a little while. And this is an update from last year, and we did spend a fair bit of time on this last year as well, although I appreciate there are some new members on the board. Do you mind going on, Rob? Thank you. Just a little bit of a kind of strategic context, because it is important to look back as well as look ahead when you're thinking about how best to achieve improved outcomes, which is what this is all about. It's trying to make things better for those people who live and work in the city, and it's the organisation's role in it. We did a bit of work back in 2012, at the very beginning of austerity, called the Commission for the Future of Local Government. It wasn't actually about Leeds, it was more about the sector as a whole, but it's been very instructive in terms of the work that's followed. It had a single sentence in there, which is still quite valid today. It's about, you know, local authorities being more enterprising, you know, more risk-taking, more innovative, etc., which we'd all, you know, want to be. And I think there's evidence, good evidence that we have been. It's about businesses being more civic. And again, I think we have a lot of evidence in the city where businesses have taken a lot more responsibility, just things like apprenticeships, etc., and the public being more engaged. And if we look at lots of our things like neighbourhood networks and the way we have strengths-based social care, that kind of thing, the public are lots more engaged, and the work that local members does is absolutely crucial to that. We took from that, we did a best council plan, which was about the council really, but it was about outcomes. And as we all know, you can't improve outcomes if just one agency works on it. Typically, it's got to be lots more than that. So the best council plan stood us in good stead. It had a lot of positive feedback. But what happened then with the pandemic, and for those of us who were around, particularly ward members at the time, know just how much was happening in localities and in wards and neighbourhoods to engage the community and really galvanise everybody in terms of doing their best for the city. And to cut a very long story short, you know, what that resulted in then was us developing the Best City Ambition, which was more of a citywide plan rather than just an organisational plan. And it is quite important to think about the difference of those two. And we've, you know, just done our second update against the Best City Ambition. Again, this board have been heavily involved in that. The Being Our Best plan, as we did last year, is about what the council's response is to that Best City Ambition and what our role, you know, crucial role in terms of we're a big enabler and convener, the work that members do, particularly and senior colleagues, but also obviously we deliver loads of services as well that make a big difference to the achieving the Best City Ambition. So I thought it was just worth mentioning that very, very quickly. Do you mind going on, Rob? Thank you. I'm not going to go through this one. I think we know about the Best City Ambition. It's 3 pillars: tackling poverty and inequality, and crucially, that team leads way of working, which we see day in, day out. You know, anybody who was at Pride yesterday, you can kind of see that team leads atmosphere just coming through really, really strongly. Thanks, Rob. So what we did last year, just as a very quick reminder, as we did have discussions here, in particular last year, the organisational plan allowed us to respond to the LGA peer group peer review that we had during 2022, reported at the very end of 2022, and those recommendations that were in there that again Scrutiny were heavily involved in. Rightly, it was very internally focused because it is about our organisation, you know, about the values and behaviours, what we expect of managers, and the main things we're changing. And on executive board this week, there's a report in Councillor Cooper's portfolio that's our annual performance report that shows progress against that, challenges, etc. As well. Thanks, Rob. What we've done with it this year is just modified it ever so slightly. Or we might say quite significantly. I'm not sure. It depends how close people are to reading it. Alex and I probably think it is quite fairly significant change. But we've tried to hold on to what we're doing with it last year, which, if you remember, was really trying to reach those 2,200 managers that lead our 14,000 staff, so that we were really appealing to them and their role for them to get the best out of everybody to deliver the best possible services. What this tries to do is really recognise the financial envelope, and I'll come on to a slide at the end that will go back to the first discussion that we had about those kind of service demands, cost of living, etc. A few weeks ago or earlier this year, the then government asked each council to produce a productivity plan. And what we said we would do is, rather than having a separate productivity plan and an organisational plan, we would try and make one plan do the same thing. So again, coherence for those managers who are on the receiving end of this, it makes more sense. So just that strapline that we've had for some while, you know, to try and be efficient, enterprising, healthy. You know, this board have been really crucial on looking at well-being and indeed on inclusion as well. So a lot of this that I'm talking about today is very, very familiar to board members. And as I say, it is our organisational response. And we have held on to what was in last year's as well. But this year's focus is it's more descriptive about a lot of the stuff that we have been doing, that is the change that's happening right throughout each directorate, and, you know, lots of cross-service examples, and indeed articulate more what we're trying to do going forward, picking up on, in particular, digital agenda, picking up, you know, what we need to do to be financially sustainable. So the thing that was worrying people rightly at the top of the meeting, you know, the organisational plan is very much focused to try and do that. Thanks, Rob. This is quite a busy slide, but you'll hopefully have had a chance to have a look at what's in the pack. I'll focus mainly on the right-hand side, the three chunks there of very interrelated chunks. But, you know, a lot of our role is about the city as a whole. You know, the fact that that is a growing city, we want it to be an inclusive city, those convening arrangements that we have where we deliver loads of stuff, but not necessarily the council doing it all. Is, you know, really, really important through that sort of team leads approach. The second chunk is about the high quality public services that we aspire to deliver day in, day out. I know we don't always meet those requirements, but that is always the intention within the budget envelope that we've got, and having that focus on continuous improvement, value for money, etc. And then the last one, which again, this board and corporate governance in audit particularly are very focused on, is being a well-run organisation, making sure that our culture and governance, you know, that we are financially sustainable, we've got the right people in the right place at the right time, etc. So those three headings, if you like, are how this organisational plan is constructed to try and make it as clear as possible. And down the left-hand side, we're just trying to give that kind of almost like hierarchy of plans in a way, from the best city ambition through into the organisation, you know, the values, what we expect of managers, and, you know, kind of organisational change that we know we need to deliver. Thanks. So just put this one up. This, again, it's quite busy, but again, you have had the slides. What we're trying to do with this one is just sort of point forward, if you like, and articulate what services might look like going forward, and the journey that we're on. And it picks up on some of the stuff that David talked about. We get a lot of feedback, understandably, particularly from members and from the public, about, you know, I have to tell my story more than once. Don't you already know what I am, what, you know, my circumstances and either what I'm complaining about, what my needs might be. So trying to have that, you know, more integrated approach around the customer. And as again has been talked about, a digital first approach, but absolutely still providing services to those who aren't digitally connected. I've talked about this before, you know, one of the things I'm trying to do with my directorate is try and make sure that sort of IDS, HR, finance colleagues, etc., work better together to provide support, say, for example, to children and families with their budget savings. So that's really important. We've talked about trading where it makes sense and trying to ensure we do, you know, have full cost recovery. It's another scrutiny board are looking at this, but again, it's relevant for us and for asset management. You know, we've still got a lot of buildings across the city. Some of them aren't being used as much as we would want them to be. So we want to, you know, reduce the size of the estate, have a better quality estate. Andrew and David have talked already about, you know, having a rationalised set of digital infrastructure. And also we've been undertaking a review of fleet. Because again, we probably need to reduce the size of our fleet whilst not compromising service delivery. So there's some quite big chunky change programs in there that will impact on services, but these are all about being financially sustainable. And then workforce planning, again, you know, you've talked about it a lot at this board, you know, when you've looked at things like attendance management, you know, we want to have, you know, we don't want to face those recruitment and retention challenges that we've talked about already. And so the bottom one is just about recognising that we probably will be smaller in size. You know, we are already considerably smaller than we were, you know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. But that we absolutely want to retain the influence in the city and pull those levers where we get others to do things, either through commissioning or through influence or through contract management, whatever it might be, in order to deliver the ambitions. And then just quickly, the last two slides. What I'm keen to do is have an even stronger connection between the financial plan and the organisational plan. So these last two slides point to a lot of the areas that we're looking at to make savings in year that we've, you know, a lot of our savings were were developed for last year and also for future years. So I'm not going to go through these in detail, but, you know, things like contract management, you know, where we need to, increasing fees and charges, etc. Looking at agency and overtime, looking at succession planning, vacancy control, etc. On to the last one, please, Rob. And then I've covered already, I think you know, our fewer buildings, rationalised digital estate, etc. I think increasingly trying to look at what more can we get for our third sector partners to prioritise to deliver, where are they better placed than we do, so that we, you know, make value for money, and obviously continuing to make use of our capital receipts and selling assets where it's appropriate to do so and where it makes sense to do so. I think that's the last one, Rob. There's a quick run through what is obviously it's a bit of everything that we do, but hopefully that makes sense to members.
Yeah, thanks, Mariana, for the report, introducing the report. Alex, do you want to add anything at this stage, or?
No, thank you, Councillor, not at this stage.
And Councillor Cooper, do you want any comment? Or I'll bring the board members and I'll bring it at the end of the discussion. I'll open to the board members. Does any board member have any question? Councillor Timmins.
Thank you. So in terms of customer service, employee well-being as well, quite often when I'm contacting different service departments, it's on behalf of the residents, well, pretty much exclusively. But I do find it quite frustrating, the urgency that it's dealt with sometimes in terms of getting back to us. And, you know, I'm conscious that there's a lot of pressure on the staff, and I'm not working in their offices, so I can't see what the workload is. But sometimes it can be weeks before people are getting back to us, and then finding them chasing. And occasionally where I've had to copy in a more senior line manager or head of service, then I've got a response instantly from that officer. So I suppose my questions around this are, what can we do to address this? Do officers have targets in terms of when they have to get back to us by? And just kind of going back to the last part in terms of integrated digital services, do we have any software in place to kind of help officers kind of prioritise workload? And just a last one that's kind of related to this is, quite often I'm finding myself chasing up jobs that I've reported. And when I'm chasing them up, they've actually been done. So is there a way that we can get responded to just to notify us that it has been done to save us time and the officers in replying to us?
There's obviously quite a lot in there. And I mean, we are doing quite a lot of work at the moment, to be honest, on our refresh customer strategy, because I think we recognise some of what you've said. Even though everybody is doing their best, as David mentioned earlier, we do use a lot of different systems, and you haven't got that kind of integration across, and not all of them also do that kind of, manage the workflow through and then make the result visible, so that then you don't have to do the chasing. So we are looking potentially at a new customer relationship management system that would help with some of that that you've described. Although, again, I do have to say, we are very, very complex and big, and it will take us a while to do that, because we do have, hundreds of services, that we need to kind of migrate and gradually make sure we've got that information. So, I mean, I think if you've got specific bits of feedback, it's always worth giving them to us, or to exec members, or to, relevant directors. We do always appreciate that feedback, because sometimes we might not be aware that there's a significant staffing problem, say, for example, and you're a bit of intelligence that can help us with that. And the only other thing I can say, we are always nagging in our communications about response times. We don't have an absolute set target concrete, because again, we are such a variable set of services. We do aim to respond to members' enquiries. I think it's within, can't remember if it's within 5 working days or 10 working days, but there is a target for that. But we don't have a way of monitoring that, because they come into so many different places and go out from so many different places, and the level of investment that we'd require to be able to manage and monitor that would probably be disproportionate, and certainly in the current context would be very difficult to do. I don't know whether I've answered everything there, because it is a bit of a minefield, but hopefully some.
Thank you, Mariana, and Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Timmins, for your question, and I think it's just to give a bit of context to this. I think that officers, I think it's 10 days they have to respond to councillors. But if you are having a specific problem with a certain service or area, or indeed if it's a particular officer that's not coming back, I say it in council, I say it at Scrutiny, I say it all the time, my door is always open to any member, whatever party you sit under. This is not just for my own group, this is for any member of council. Please come and see me if you've got any particular areas of concern, issues that you want to talk to me about, and I will hopefully be able to help to resolve them for you. I think and especially when you first come on council, it's difficult to know that you are getting the right person, first of all, that you're making inquiries to, and if they've passed it to somebody else. There can be a real variety of maybe why they're not being responded to, or indeed that chase-up question's really kind of relevant, that you're not getting that information before you're actually having to chase it up as well. You should be, that should be coming through to you straight away from officers. So I'd like to pick that up as well outside of Scrutiny, if I can, Chair, and deal with that. But just to say, to put it in context a little bit, the amount of employees that we now have is considerably less than we did have. And that's due to our trying to make our budget and the challenging financial situation, that we've lost over now 1,000 member of staff in just a number of 2 or 3 years. And you can't do that without others picking up, some of that workload as well. Or as Mariana was articulating in the slides there, actually we need to be the shape of the organisation that fits the model, so fits the service area, that fits the employees that we have working for us as well. But all of that and all of that transformation and change, sometimes that person who you've maybe emailed or telephoned and asked for a response might not have all that information at hand to be and know what they're supposed to be responding to in 10 days, I've got to say. So please come and see me. Let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cooper and Councillor Hamilton. And before I bring, thank you, Councillor Timmins again.
No, I was just going to say that we do have a members stream, members housing, members highways, etc. And they always reply, saying that an officer will be in touch with you in 5 days, 10 days. So if we use the members on the email, they do reply. And I agree with you, Councillor Cooper, that because we've lost so many staff, it's not as fast as it used to be. But if the members use those members line, they do get response to them. And I mean, they'll tell you within 5 days or 10 days, but sometimes it's a lot quicker.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for that clarification. And I can also echo Councillor Cooper has the her doors are always open for any members or anybody to walk in and, ask any questions. She will be helpful, and she has helped me as well previously. And I just want to say thank you for that as well. Thank you, Councillor Timmins, for asking that question. Have you got any supplementary question or? Yep.
Yeah, just really quickly. I suppose my expectations coming from a customer service background quite high. I used to have 2 days, which I accept not going to happen here. And I understand about the services reducing in size in terms of manpower, and I suppose that's why I asked the question about, do we have any software in place to help people prioritise and be more efficient? And the one that wasn't quite answered was in terms of getting notifications when jobs are complete. I'm probably thinking more in terms of the environmental action, stuff like that, because we report quite a lot, and finding chasing it a lot or asking the residents, and it's already been done.
Yeah. Sorry. If you specifically talking about environmental service, I have to say that's one of the areas that have received a lot of cuts from the budget to help assist with the children's services pressures and demands. So they're really trying to be operationally focused and deliver what they need to deliver. But I accept sometimes that's at the cost of maybe not responding to you to say that job has been done in time. But I know over consecutive years that they're the ones who have received some reductions in their budget, because of the financial situation. So that could be, you can't deliver the level of service that we delivered and take, those reductions year on year and still deliver that, high quality response times as well, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Marianne, did you want to add anything? No, Councillor Cooper's already done. Any more questions on this item? No? Okay. Can I thank Mariana and Alex as well for coming to the Scrutiny Board this morning. So thank you. And the recommendation are on page 104. If we are happy, then can we move to item number 10? Yep. Brilliant, thank you. So we moved to our last agenda item, which is the work programme. Guests are welcome to stay. If not, thank you for attending this morning. I'll ask Rob to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So this is the board's work programme updated from the last meeting. So a couple of additional items were added based on the sources of work item considered in June. Those are on Civic Enterprise Leeds and the Core Business Transformation Programme. So they're included. This Appendix 1 provides the work programme for the year 2024-25, and Appendix 2 has the latest exec board minutes for member reference. But yes, obviously, as ever, this is open to member shaping the work programme should they wish to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you have any comments or question on this agenda item? Nope. Oh, Councillor Chapman.
The one in October, the medium-term financial strategy, is that just performance monitoring, or is that the first look at the budget proposals?
So that is, it will provide an element of the 25-26 budget, but it's actually that medium-term framework. So the provisional budget items would usually come forward in December, the working group, depending on how it's structured through the executive board, actually. But usually there's a working group in December.
Yeah, I thought last year we did get them earlier, we did do it earlier last year, didn't we?
Think that would be there was a working group in September, and Councillor Cooper actually referenced it earlier about the briefings. So I did whisper to Councillor Khan that literally we had a meeting about a September briefing for members on the forthcoming budget. So that is basically coming out soon for September. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Chairman.
Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Timmins.
Yep, just a quick one. Are we going to be scrutinising the change in employee payday? Because I know a few concerns have been raised over that, and I attended a briefing on that, but I think it would be useful at scrutiny as well.
Yes, Councillor Timmins, it's certainly within our remit. So if the board wished to do that, then I could take that away.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of today's business. Thank you for your attendance and for your contribution. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 16th of September at 10:30 a.m. But brief meeting will start at 10 a.m.